we hired this nurse to just give us some sleep from like 11 to 5. And the second night, she's like banging on the door going, I need help, I need help. I'm like, you're fired. So we just sucked it up. And it was brutal. I mean, it really was. I mean, I truly had no idea. I remember my mom came down and she was going to stay for a couple of weeks. She lasted about 10 days. I mean, she was peeling rubber out of the driveway. I am bawling. And I cried.
Everyone, welcome to Writers of the World. We have a very highly esteemed author panel with us today, and the topic we are addressing is motherhood and Mother's Day. Elizabeth Silva is the author of another cheesy family newsletter. She's a community contributor to the Dallas Morning News and a former counselor and college teacher. She is a mother of 3, grandmother of 5, and is currently raising 2 of her grandchildren. Lisa Boucher is the award-winning author of Raising the Bottom. Her book has already helped women make positive changes in their lives. She is a champion for women and believes that when we love and care for ourselves, our children and family reap the rewards. Jeanne McWilliams Blasberg is the award-winning author of Eden, a Novel, and The Nine. Upon graduation from Smith College, she made stops on Wall Street, Macy's, and writing case studies at Harvard Business School. She is a mother of 3 humans and a furry companion. Lizbeth Meredith is the award-winning author of Pieces of Me. She's a probation officer by day, writer and speaker by night, and parent to 2 grown daughters. She's based in Anchorage, Alaska. So the first question is, what does Mother's Day mean to you, and what is the role of a mother?
I think moms are the heart of the home, and they make everything go round. When I was thinking about with my sons, my role was to shape them into humans, but allowing them to be who they are. And I think it's so important that we nurture our children. I work in healthcare, I work with kids, and there's a lot of kids that have so many problems. And so much of it goes back to not being nurtured, not having that role model maybe, or that loving figure to give them the tender side and the strong side. When they miss that, it causes a lot of problems in their life. So I feel like a mother is just that person, that rock that the kids know there's someone always in their court, and allowing them to be who they are instead of who maybe we want them to be. I think that's the central role of a mom, is to let that child bloom and grow the way they're going to bloom and grow.
I'd say, being a mother is the greatest honor in the world. All the roles I've played in my life, nothing was more fun or more special than being a mother and raising children. My favorite Mother's Days were when they were really little. I think now I look at Mother's Day and it's almost with a little nostalgia and a little wistfulness, because I've lost my mother, my mother-in-law, my grandmother. I don't like being the oldest mother in the family. I feel like I'm too young to be a matriarch. So the last few years, I've tried to kind of finesse Mother's Day a little bit. It makes me have a few pangs of sadness, as well as, getting those nice calls from my kids. But I think there's a lot of responsibility, and when you're the mother in the family, I don't know, it's kind of strange to not have a mother above me anymore.
I'm going to agree that it is such a critical role for a child. I am a single mom, and so I ended up being the dad also. I was a sole supporter for almost my kid's entire life. But my own mother backed out of all of her children's lives pretty early on. And so it's been decades since I've heard from her, and she's still alive. And I feel like the loss as a daughter is that every time something amazing or something tragic happens, there is nobody. And so I try very hard to almost make that up, and it's not always very functional, but to try to be everything that I wish I'd had for my own daughters. And they're like, the little one's turning 30, the oldest is 31. And still, it's a pretty big role. It is an honor, but it is a big role to fill. And I feel like that's why we celebrate Mother's Day hard, because we as moms are expected to be the cruise director of our families and to be that safety net. It's a beautiful honor, and it's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of responsibility. My family all lives close, so any family celebration, everybody looks to me to plan it, and it's usually at my house. And I've often thought about, what are they going to do? When I'm not around, are they going to kind of fall apart? What is going to happen? But my role as a mom is pretty unique, because I'm a mom and a grandmother to 2 of the kids, and then a grandmother / mom to 3 of the others. So I've been a mom for 40 some odd years, and still being one, and will be, for actually in my home until my little one graduates.
And mothers are supreme multitaskers, and adding book writing and publishing to that certainly creates a new dynamic. Can you describe how you balance that with being a mother, and if you have any advice for other mothers writing books?
Well, I'll start. I mean, I think all my best material came from being a mother. So my book is about 4 generations of women and kind of the misunderstandings between mothers and daughters. So I don't think I could have had the emotional knowledge without playing the role of a daughter and a mother. And so my book really took a long time to write. I wouldn't say it was necessarily like I was getting up and writing early in the morning. I mean, I took a really long time to write my book. So it's not necessarily that being a mother and writing the book was something that was like logistically really hard to manage, because I think I just never really considered myself a serious author until the book started getting closer and I could imagine it as a finished product. And that's when I really turned on the gas. But what I'll have to say is that whenever I thought about quitting and not finishing this project, my kids all held my feet to the fire. And so it was great to be a mother, because you have these children who you're telling all day long to do their best and never give up. And just because something's hard, you shouldn't quit. And they turned it around on me and they finished my book. So I wouldn't be an author if it wasn't for my children pushing me and having very high expectations of me. And I wanted to make them proud.
I feel like it took a long, long time to balance the responsibilities of being a mom and being an author. And it took me a ridiculously long time to publish my book. But still, again, I felt like the children were the inspiration. And like, Jeanne said, they were also the accountability coaches too. And so it made it all the more exciting to know that one day, if I could finish the book and get it published before I died, that they would be at my launch. And that was always an image I kept in my head. I tried not to make myself feel guilty. And I would say to moms who are writing their books or articles, whatever they're writing, we have so much going on. If we don't show up every single day for the page, it's all right. It's really all right. And we don't need other people to kind of writer shame us. Because we do have other things in our lives to balance and other opportunities to give our energies at. But it's also an act of self-care to show up to the page. And so I feel great now that my kids are grown. I can show up most every day for writing, but hopefully moms don't give up. They let their kids inspire them, and they don't feel guilty when they don't have time. There were weeks and months where I didn't write, and it still turned out okay.
I can relate to what Liz is talking about because I started writing back when my sons were little. I think they were 4. And so I was trying to work this into, I was also working part-time. So it was just squeezing it in whenever I could kind of thing. And Raising the Bottom is my 5th book. So I was writing fiction. And the boys, one memory they talk about, they said they remember being in my office or writing room, whatever you want to call it, and they had blocks and they were playing with their blocks while I was writing. So I did it like that. And as they got older, I have the twins, and my one son, I forgot him at school. The other one got off the bus, and the other one I was supposed to pick up. And when I saw the one get off the bus, I'm like, "Where's your brother?" And I was like, oh my gosh. So what had happened is I sat down and I'm like, I'm just going to write, a little bit and get this or whatever I was doing. Well, I get so engrossed. And then the time went by. So I kind of learned a lesson from that. And I'm like, okay, if I need to be anywhere within an hour, whatever, I cannot start writing because I just get too lost. So, that's how I sort of worked that with them, is just doing it whenever I had time, or I got really good at telling my husband and the boys, like, I got to go away for a few days. And so I did that once in a while when I really felt like I wanted to start a new book or get the meat of it down. So that was helpful, but just trying to, fit it in. And like, I love what you said, it's self-care to take care of yourself and say, this is who I am. This is what I have to do. And I didn't write for years at different points when I was raising them. They were really so involved in sports and traveling and all this stuff. But for me, I was not as happy. I was not as peaceful. And I realized once I went back to it and started another book, I thought, I need to not neglect that side of who I am. I mean, I am a writer, I'm a mother, I'm a nurse, I'm all these other roles, a wife, but I'm also a writer, and I'm happy when I'm trying to at least put words on the page, whether they're good or not. I'm happy doing that. I think it's fun. I mean, I really enjoy it, and it gives me an outlet. I think it's my creative outlet that all of us that are creative, we need an outlet for that streak. So
I didn't start writing until I actually retired from my career. So, the kids have always seen me be busy, and I don't think they think anything about it, when I'm sitting there at the computer for hours at a time or whatever, because that's what I always am. I'm busy. And so really it's kind of been, I haven't actually labeled myself as a writer yet, because I never was. I mean, this is the first time I started writing articles for the newspaper, and then another friend asked me to write one for a magazine, and one thing led to another, and so I never see that it interferes with the kids, and honestly, they kind of forget that I even do this. So, because I have so many other roles.
What do you think of helicopter parenting, and how do you think modern society has influenced parenting styles?
Well, I want to start with this because I was a school counselor for 25 years, and I'm very familiar with helicopter parents, and I think that people who hover over their kids and interfere nonstop in what they're doing, and they're always on the phone to the counselor or the teacher or whoever, they're crippling their kids. Mm-hmm. And this seems to be a trend these days. I feel like I've told a lot of parents just to back off and let their kids make some mistakes, but it's something about it's a generational thing, I think, more than anything. And I learned I'm on my sixth kid now, so I learned as I went by in life that if you enable your kids too much, then they're going to keep wanting you to do that. And so, now they say that they have parents that are calling the college deans and people like that, continuing to try to run their kids' lives. So I have a very, very strong opinion of that type of parenting. I think it's really popular right now, but I feel like it's that we're doing this generation of kids a huge disfavor by staying so deeply involved in everything they do.
I totally agree with what you just said. The helicopter parenting I feel like it's a disaster. And I think you were saying it's a generational thing. And I think a lot of it, from my perspective, is that people are so unsure of themselves and they look at their child. I've seen parents, and I guess I'm reflecting on some of the parents that we've dealt with at the hospital, that they seem to look at this child instead of a separate person that they're parenting as a property. This is my property and I'm going to mold them and I've got to control every aspect of their life. And these kids are a nervous wreck. A lot of them, they have a lot of anxiety and this depression, and it goes back to this parental pressure of the parents wanting the kids to be, parents have to be realistic about their kids. Not everybody is brilliant. Not everybody is a great athlete. Not everybody, but it's like they decide, I want my kid to be a football player, and by God, he's going to be a football player. Whether the kid's built for it, likes it, doesn't seem to matter. So they're pushing their agenda on these children, and the kids are a mess. So, I'm like, back off. I agree. I think you've got to give them some freedom, let them make mistakes, let them fail. Not, I know it's kind of a scarier world a little bit. There's a lot more things to get into with social media and that. So I think you do have to toggle a balance there with being aware of that kind of stuff. So they're not, having that kind of freedom to sit in their room. But that's kind of dangerous anyway, parents that allow their kids all that privacy and electronics in their rooms. I don't really agree with that. But, I think we need to give the kids room and let them fly, because once they get out, I know my son said when they went to college, the kids that were off the chain were the ones that came from really strict parentings or helicopter parents, and they finally got a gasp of freedom and they were off and running in a whole different, kind of not a good way. So you've got to give them some rope to let them hang themselves while they're still young. And there's, when my husband, I think one of the wisest things he said is when the boys were about 16, 17, he said, we got to keep loosening the rein, because if they're going to mess up, let them do it now while they're minors. And I thought that was really sage advice, to see how they would, handle having a driver's license with parameters, but, trusting them to do the right thing. How were they going to handle it when they were seniors in high school? I took in a young lady who was addicted to alcohol and opiates, and she usurped all of my time and attention. And so I was very focused on her, and, they kind of were doing what they were doing, but I knew they were handling it. And I was really proud of the fact that I gave them freedom and they were able to handle it and do the right thing. So you've got to see where they are in it, instead of holding onto those reins so tight that they just want to break out like a horse out of the paddock that's been, in the stall for too long.
I agree with you, Lisa. And I just wanted to expand on what you said with parents treating their children like their property as opposed to like an individual. It's almost like they treat their children as if their children are an extension of themselves. And it goes back to some insecurity, I think, that there's a competitiveness between parents and they're playing it out with their children as the tokens on the game board or something. But it's actually very a very pertinent question for me. I just got my advanced reader copies of The Nine, which is, The Nine, coming out next August. It's about Hannah, a well-meaning helicopter mom who enrolls her brilliant son in the center of her universe into the boarding school of her dreams, and neither of them are prepared for what awaits. So anyway, I've been studying up on helicopter parenting for the last 3 years as I've watched this phenomenon not just sweep the country, but I think sweep New England pretty harshly. This is a part of the country where somebody goes to school, even nursery school, is considered a barometer of their future success in life, and people get insanely wrapped up in it. So I've had a good time putting it all under the microscope.
That's going to be a great book. Now, for me, it is, I will just say that one of my favorite humor essays, well, the favorite humor essay I ever published was called Conscious Unhovering, because, and it was last year around Mother's Day when I published it, but my kids were actually sort of everything. I took all of my finances, all of my well wishes, everything, and went overseas to try to find them after they were kidnapped, and ended up with 2 non-English speaking children after 2 years. So I had so much hope and great intentions, and I just kind of loved them like a little bitty kid holding a bird that they rescued, and then when the kid unclasps, the bird is dead, hopefully, and my kids are still alive, which is really great, but it drove them crazy. It was super dysfunctional. And in the end, of course, they grew up and left home. And then I was left what I felt like with all this unexpressed advice, like so many good intentions and so many great thoughts that nobody cared to hear anymore. And there was nothing but my cats. And so I just started accidentally, it would just like erupt. Like I would be standing in line for coffee and see the barista talking about doing poorly in class. And then I'd be like, college is so important. You have no idea how much it's going to mean to you. Or when my mechanic let his hair grow long and it was super unattractive, and I went to pick up my car and he told me he was making a commercial. I'm like, you have to cut your hair today. And I don't mean to do it, but it's hard adjustment. Nobody really helps parents with a step down program of like how to just slowly start releasing your kids. And really after about 14 or 15 in hindsight, and then 16, not that your kids don't need you, but they need a lot less of you in increments. And if I could ever figure it out, I would love to write a how-to book now that it's too late and my kids are all anxious and messed up. But anyway, it is hard. It's hard having an empty nest, but I do agree that helicopter parenting is, in fact, devastating for children and their sense of autonomy and self-esteem. But it's still hard for parents. It's still hard to know your role in their lives. I remember meeting a young man that I knew would be perfect for my daughter, and I was just intent on making sure that she connected with him. They were in their mid-20s at this point. And I know no one appreciated it in the end, but I had to do it before I realized it. And
Liza,
there was a confirmation.
Liza, you're gonna be that woman on the sidewalk who goes up to people and be like, you should put a hat on that baby. It's cool.
Yes,
outside.
I am that woman. It's sad, but true.
I'm that woman too.
Thank you.
And women's issues are at the forefront of the political discussion these days. In what ways do you think mothers can raise daughters who are strong, self-assured, and independent?
I'm not sure how my mother did it, but she did. And I guess in a lot of ways you do what your mom did. And I know, Liz, in your case, you did not want to do that. But I failed with one dramatically. The other one is chairman of her county Democratic Party. she's just a go-getter. She owns her own business. And so I don't know. I think a lot of it depends on them and the people that they choose to associate with, and their own inner psyche. I believe very strongly in genetics, and I think that you inherit a lot of your personality traits, and that no matter what your family members might do to bolster your self-esteem or whatever, sometimes that just doesn't work. And so I've raised 3 girls. One of them is a mess. One of them, as I said, is very strong and independent. One of them just got out of college and is out there feeling her way in the world, but very much a feminist. So I don't know. I think in a lot of ways you're just kind of going along in life, and a lot of what you do reflects on your children. And they observe you. You're their role model, and they observe you. So that's the best thing that you can do, I think, is be a good role model for them.
I totally agree. I think having ambition and demanding respect from other people is a great way to model strength. We have 2 boys and a girl. Our daughter is the youngest. And I think we made a conscientious effort to treat her just the same way we treat the boys. I mean, there wasn't much difference when it came to academic expectation, athletic expectation, and we made a conscious effort not to praise her with words like, you're so pretty, you're so cute, you're our princess, you're our little girl. We stayed away from all those kinds of diminutive, kind of precious little adjectives, and emphasized strength and hard work. And we still do. I mean, I think I told her she looked pretty in her prom dress, but that's about as often as we talk about looks in our family. So I think that's really important, not to fall into the stereotypes of treating your daughters differently than you treat your sons.
Well, I didn't raise girls, but I think with boys, it's still a lot the same, that you've got to give them the confidence and the structure. And Patty said it best. I mean, you've got to be a role model, because they do pay attention. And I didn't realize how much they paid attention until actually this book. There's a letter, an unsolicited letter from my son that was just stunning. And I put it in there because it was really to highlight the moms that were drinking, and they thought they were functioning, and their daughters had a very different perspective of their mothers than my sons did. And that was just because I was doing the best I can to be the best person that I could be, so that they would know how to get through life, or they could at least see you can do it, like you were saying, and others have said. You've got to work hard, you've got to show up, try to let things go, not hold grudges, move on, have a little bit of resiliency. And, I've seen some parents in like meltdown mode, and you think, well, how in the world are their kids going to learn how to do this if mom is doing meltdown mode, or slugging back 3 shots when she's not happy about the outcome of something. So it was really important to me to do very differently than how I was raised, because my mother was an alcoholic, and she was very loving, and, her imprint is all over my book. But, she didn't do such a good job. I mean, we kind of raised ourselves. There were 4 of us, and we were all just running amok. So the fact that I'm sitting here on an author panel is pretty amazing, actually, because I should have been, God knows where, out there, Crazyville or something. So it's pretty cool that we can also rebound from, like others have said, it is also a personal choice that if you find yourself going down the wrong road, like, okay, put on the brakes. And so, because we can't blame parents for everything, because people do have their own mind. And by the time they're adults, like I always tell my sons now, if you go off the reservation now, I am not going to hold, I don't feel responsible at all. You're grown men. So if whatever you do now, it's on you. It is not on me, and I'm not going to own that. So I've had that healthy detachment where, I'm proud of them. They're doing great in their lives, and I hope they continue to do so. But there's no guarantees. We have to all make our own choices at some point.
A good point. And I would say, again, role modeling, like you all had mentioned, is a great way to raise healthy, independent young women. Things like anxiety disorders or mental health or trauma or certain other things could impact how that final outcome will be. But I still feel like being a role model plus reminding young women of history, the history we as women have had, when we were able to vote, when the war came and we had to go to work, when previously it had been discouraged. And I was at the gym with one of my girls the other day, and she was very aware of some of the things going on in Saudi Arabia right now, but actually historically, just the ability to be able to drive when it became illegal for men to beat their wives in the United States, which was not that long ago. So knowing our history and role modeling, it does come together. I think, I hope that I don't hear many more generations of young women say, I'm not a feminist, but because we really owe a lot to the feminist movement for our ability to write a book and have a conversation about parenting and all of that.
Mm-hmm. And was there a time you felt pressure to take one path as a parent while your intuition warned you it was not the right thing to do?
I took the wrong path many, many times with my daughter, who is an addict, in that part of me told myself, if you're a good mom, you'll take her in and try to help her. And even when my heart brought her in, but my mind told me, if you do this, it's not going to work out. And I did that over and over and over again. My mind telling me, don't bring her in. All you're doing is prolonging her addiction. But my heart was saying, how can I turn her out?
That's hard.
Really hard.
I guess I'll just refer actually to The Nine, my forthcoming novel. Hannah struggles with dropping her 14-year-old boy off at boarding school. It's this acceptance she always wanted from, a very esteemed institution, yet it's awfully hard to drop off a 14-year-old child and leave them in a dorm. And even though this book is not a memoir, it's based a lot on different feelings I had. My son decided he wanted to go to boarding school after going on a weekend with his dad to his father's alma mater. And I had no idea that this is what our family was, headed towards. But giving my son the right to kind of decide where he wanted to go to high school was something we did. Anyway, he ended up going to such a boarding school, and there were a lot of times I'd be on the phone with him and I wanted to just drive up there and go in his dorm and hold him or bring him home. I never did, but I think a lot of that emotion is what drove me to write this story. So I can't point to any one time in particular, but there's just this general feeling like he was leaving home way too early. And, certain issues did manifest themselves, but he turned out okay in the end. Good. Spoiler alert. He's okay.
That's always a good thing. I can't picture or pinpoint one specific time. I mean, I think there's parental pressure from the time the kids are little. And if you're not okay with yourself and your decisions, I mean, I feel like you could get blown like the wind. Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I, and I just made some decisions based on what I thought was the right thing. I mean, it started when they were little, when one of the twins was ready to go to kindergarten and the other one wasn't. And I surmised that myself before the testing. And I was fine with it, and I got a lot of people chirping in my ear about, well, you need to get the other one ready and you need to. And I was like, no, I'm not doing any of that. I'm going to let them be 5 years old. One will go to kindergarten, one will go to pre-K, and the other one, I made him repeat kindergarten. And he was so mad at me, and every day he would say, I'm supposed to be in first grade. I'm supposed to be. He said this and I finally said, when are you going to let that go? So, but they're so close now, and they got to then go on and do the rest of the grades together. They ended up going to college together, rooming together in college. So it was a lot of togetherness there. And that, I mean, I struggled with some of that. Is this the right thing? But it really wasn't my decision. I mean, they both were collegiate athletes. They got full rides to Miami University here in Ohio. And how do you pass that up? I mean, you're just not going to turn that down. So it was a great academic school. And I thought, this is awesome that even though there was a part of me that struggled with I don't know, they're getting kind of old here to be still together all of the time. And they did struggle a little bit that first year after they graduated college, and one ended up in Philadelphia and the other one was elsewhere. And, now they live across the country from each other. But those adjustment periods, and, there's that urge to kind of, like we were talking earlier, that momminess kicks in and you want to jump in there, and I had to just get my hands off of it. I mean, they had to go their separate ways at some point. There was just no way to intervene, leave it alone, and it was the best thing. And I think they said, we didn't realize we were like two half a persons, and until the other one was gone, now we got to be a whole person. And they were like a perfect marriage. When one was weak, the other one was strong. And I said, my God, if everybody's marriage could be like this, they'd have their spats and 5 minutes later they're hugging and making up. So it was a great little marriage, but it was time to get divorced for them. After, when you're 24 years old and you're still rooming with your brother, it's time to move on. And, it's good that they did, but all of that, as a parent, you feel like, should I do this? Should I do? And sometimes you just got to do nothing and let them figure it out and let, life take its course.
I think for me, I made a lot of bad decisions when my kids were growing up, but a lot of good ones too. I mean, I feel like all things considered, it was rough, but it turned out. And it looked like I was heading toward the finish line when my kids were, I was a young parent. And so when I was in my early 40s, they're both grown. But then when my first child went away to college, she had a psychotic break. And developmentally, she changed from being someone who was 18 and 19 back to being a little kid again. And so all bets were off. She could not go to school anymore, and she could not live on her own. And I just had not seen that coming, of course. And I was so angry when that happened, because I felt like, don't I get a break? Is there something in this life for me? Because I really tried to put them ahead of myself, and I was ready for it to be my time. So I took her back home, and there was a period of about 5 years where she literally couldn't be left to remember to shower, to turn off the burner. If she tried to cook for herself, she just had a whole lot of problems calibrating and recalibrating with her mental health and with medications and therapy, all of that. It was very hard. We had a little girl again. I had some people try to helpfully in their mind, and I know they meant it lovingly, suggest that I was enabling my daughter, and that perhaps if I just threw her out, it would, in fact, my other daughter, who now understands more, but she was the first to say, you should just put her in an institution. You should just, blah, as though that was available. But people, gave some helpful, what they thought was helpful information on, here's what you need to do so that your life will be okay, even if hers isn't. And that was probably the most pressure I had ever felt. And it took me a long time to feel good about what I was doing. I worked with my own therapist to help me parent better her until she got on a better path. And I think that was maybe one of the hardest times of my life. I had thought rescuing my kidnapped daughter, somehow or another, God would look at me and say, she deserves 2 thumbs up, and let's give her a pass on any other stress for the next 10 years. And it turned out that was not the case, but it all turned out okay and fine, and always a little tenuous. But I don't think that people meant that harmfully at all. It just was a difference of generations too. People have a lot of input once your kids are grown as to how quickly you ought to boot them out based on our own childhoods. And if we look back on that, that didn't always turn out well for some of us. We had starter marriages and may have racked up a lot of student loan debt or whatever if we were left to our own devices at 17 and 18. Now we know the human brain isn't fully developed until the late 20s. So, it was a challenging time, but we came through.
So this is a good segue into the next question, which you've addressed a little bit already. What was the most stressful time you faced while raising your children?
That was mine, so I defer the rest to you all.
I guess mine is, this might be something other people can relate to. I had 3 kids in 4 years, and my husband was starting his career and traveling and at the office a lot. We had our first after we'd been married 4 years, but it took us inside, I was like, do I really want to do this? Like, I still felt that I was feeling out the whole marriage, career. Do I want to continue to work? Do I want to have kids right away? And, one thing led to another, boom, boom, boom. I've got 3 little kids and I'm 30 years old. And, I just remember fighting each day to kind of hold it together. They say the days are long and the years are short. And I do look back on those days, and just our togetherness and our closeness was really intense. But I think I have something in common with some of the other women on this panel, in that I'm an only child of an alcoholic. My mother died when she was 60 of her alcoholism. So I feel like at that age, 30, with the 3 little kids at home, we'd get home from the playground and the white wine in the refrigerator seemed to be calling to me. Luckily, I'd seen that movie, and it took all the discipline I had not to go down that route. But those were exhausting times, and I wasn't getting a lot of support. You just almost don't think it's going to end with these little people pulling on you and needing you, and almost feeling like your brain doesn't have any room to do anything else. So I don't really want to admit, because I think of those as also my salad days and my happiest, glorious days. I was just saying how much Mother's Day meant when the kids were little. But if I really have to pinpoint any time, I guess it was between when my daughter was born, my youngest of 3. My mother was actually going into her 5th or 6th rehab at that point. I remember my daughter being 4 weeks old, and I had to take her to Betty Ford with me to do a thing with my mother out there in Palm Springs. And I had a 3-year-old, and I was telling my 3-year-old he had to be the big boy in the family. He was now 3, and so that he could, get himself ready for school. It was crazy. So those were the most stressful years. I have a lot of compassion when I see young mothers juggling a lot, and I'll always open a door or pull someone's stroller up. I just remember those years as just being brutal.
Yeah, I think the most brutal time for me was the first 2 years of my son's lives. I mean, I was blindsided by the whole twin thing. I never babysat, so I had like no experience. My mother lived 4 hours away. I'm fairly new in sobriety. Then when the twins are 6 months old, I decided to go back to school, and that's when I went to nursing school, and my husband was livid. He was not charming during those years at all. He was partying too much. He was resentful that, I hadn't finished school before, and now all of a sudden I've got these twins and they're 6 months old, and you're going back to school. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I pissed away a whole decade and in and out of college for 10 years and hadn't finished my degree. So now that I have these babies, what's going through my mind is I need to be able to put food on the table for them if I'm not in this marriage. And, I'd been a flight attendant and trained horses and worked in marketing for a while, but none of those really seemed to jive for twins, with marketing. I was traveling. So were brutal years. I mean, I remember, and I think school did save me because I started kind of slow and I was at least away for like 4 hours twice a week, kind of thing. And it really was saved my sanity. And they had colic to boot. It was so bad that we hired this nurse to just give us some sleep from like 11 to 5. And the second night, she's like banging on the door going, I need help. I'm like, you're fired. So we just sucked it up. And it was brutal. It really was. And they didn't have all the baby gear that they do now and just slept in their.
Nobody warned you. Nobody warns you about that.
No, I truly had no idea. I remember my mom came down and she was going to stay for a couple of weeks. She lasted about 10 days. She was peeling rubber out of the driveway. I am bawling. And I cried for 2 weeks. They were only 5 pounds. So I was scared of them because they were so skinny. And I remember her on the last day, she said, Lisa, you need to get over here and learn how to get these babies a bath. And I'm just bawling. I'm like, I'm too scared, And I tried to breastfeed and that didn't work. And my milk just dried. It was just one debacle after another. And then between my husband being just an a-hole, excuse my French, can I say that on here? So those were really, really challenging years. And I look back now and go, I don't even know how I did that. I prayed a lot. And that is really what got me through because it was just crazy. And like I said, I don't have family here. So there was very little support and these babies that never stopped crying. And I used to take them to the doctor every week going, there's something wrong. And, they were like, just deal with it. It was colic, and it's just, I think it's the no sleep. It's just really hard to function. And then I'm trying to study and it was just, those were rough years. I'm glad to be past them. I made it. I don't think I wrote any books during those years. I know I didn't because I don't think I started writing until after nursing school. But wow. So I survived. We're strong when we have to be.
Well, I went through a real serious depression when my kids were little, and I was teaching full time and just felt like I was being pulled from all directions. I definitely relate to that. Thank God for antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication and all of those things. But of course, the worst time ever for me were the years that my daughter was addicted to heroin, because every day I was waiting for the phone call, telling me that she was dead. And she was already in her 20s, but her little girl, I was raising her at the same time because she had just abandoned her. And I can't describe the hell that my husband and I went through during that time period and the fear that we had. And she got off of it. I'm just shocked, but she did get off of it. She OD'd several times. Mm-hmm. But then she got on methadone, which is also not a good thing to be on. But that was absolutely the worst time of my life.
Thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to quote Warren Buffett, who said, "Give your children enough to do something, but not enough to do nothing." What do you think the difference is between enabling and supporting your kids?
Enabling is doing something for them that they can do for themselves. Supporting them is encouraging them.
I would say buffering their consequences. If we're trying to jump in and take the consequences of their conduct and smooth it out so that they don't feel the impact, that's also enabling.
Yeah.
I came from a family of enablers. My mother was, my dad was an alcoholic. I was an only child. She enabled him, and then when I had kids, when they ran into problems. Now, I wasn't a helicopter parent. I let them fall on their faces, but particularly when my daughter got into drugs, I thought I could save her. And so I, along with my mother, who also helped enable her, we did the same thing over and over and over again. You know, instead of showing tough love and just saying, get on out of here, you know, until you get your life together. I was taught well by my mother, and I took her under my wing and thought that I could make that decision to get sober for her. And guess what? That didn't work.
That's hard. I guess I'll try to answer on a little lighter note, but this is a conversation I had with my daughter, who's a college junior recently. We were, I think, just working over the stove around the winter holidays, and I was talking about how the house we live in is a little too big for her father and I now, and that we might be downsizing at some point. And although, you know, living in Boston is as long as we live in Boston, we might as well live in this house. You know, who knows where my kids are going to end up. And I kind of like the idea of figuring that out and maybe being close to them. And her eyes perked up, like, really? You want to be close to us? And I said, yeah, I mean, my oldest son, he might go to graduate school in Boston, or, you know, she said, Mom, is coming home an option? And I said, well, you know, if you have a job and you're going to be living in Boston anyway, working, yeah, living at home would be an option if you wanted to save rent. But living at home is not an option if you're thinking you're going to like chill out here or something. So I remember when I went, I left home. My parents lived in California, and I came to Massachusetts for college, and they moved to Texas and got an apartment, and I didn't have a bedroom anymore where they lived. And I mean, I'm not saying like every kid deserves a bedroom to go back to, but I think there's a fine line. At what age do you decide that you don't give them just, they know that there's that net, and I never had that. So I guess I'm a little bit more in favor of letting my kids feel that there's a place to land. They're in their early 20s right now, and I don't want them to have like so much anxiety over their lives, and I want them to be willing to take some risks too. So we're in this very funny kind of negotiation right now, and trying to figure out what is enabling and what is supportive.
That sounds.
I definitely don't want kids living in my basement. That's not happening, but you know what I mean. When they're 30 or something, right. I don't know. I want to be there if they need us now, though.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Recently, parents who have wanted to buy their children's educational success have made the news. What are some of the underlying reasons this happens? How can we both accept and embrace our children's capacities, even if they don't meet our expectations?
Well, I'll start with that one. I think it's accepting your kids for who they are. That whole scandal is really very sad for mostly for the kids. I mean, it's pretty much the parents saying, well, I know you're not going to ever get in these schools that I want you to go to, so I can have bragging rights. I mean, the self-centeredness of the parents is stunning. And I think a lot of what we were talking about earlier with this generation, it's very self-centered. It's all about them. And where these kids go is not, can't be all about the parent. I mean, it says to the child, you're just not going to make it, so I need to cheat and lie and do all these things for you. I mean, talk about ruining someone's self-esteem. I can't think of a better way to say, just forget it, you're a loser. I mean, that's pretty much what the parents were saying, is you're a loser, so we're going to go to these all sorts of extreme measures to help you succeed. And that is not helpful. I mean, a child can be very, very successful going to a state college. If they have the drive and the ambition, they can do it. Not everybody needs to go to an amazing school to be successful. There's a lot of people that, I read this article a long time ago, and don't ask me where, but it said C students. Most of the people who were millionaires and did really, really well in life were C students. And I think that makes perfect sense, because they probably had to develop some people skills, and maybe they had to work and were doing other things in addition to going to school. So they're learning to multitask and handle responsibility, and all these qualities are really beneficial in life. So when you have a trajectory that's just go to the right school, meet only the right people, it's like this white bread of there's just no depth, there's no substance there. It's just a cardboard cutout.
I read a bunch of the transcripts that went with the indictments, and I just thought they were rich. The dialogue that's cut out from the telephone tapes and the telephone wires is really just unbelievable dialogue, especially if you're a writer listening to what these parents were saying. And I completely agree with what Lisa said. I wanted to just add that what I got from listening to or reading some of those conversations is that it really seemed like some of these parents were so wealthy and used to relying on their money to solve every problem that they didn't even really seem that involved in their children's lives. Like, they didn't really know that much about their kids, hadn't spent that much time with them. And it just makes it even more sad. Wasn't even, just a certain level of detachment, and then an attitude like, I can come in at the 11th hour and with my power and my money kind of leapfrog over the system. And you get the sense that they have that they're like the type of people who cheat to get the good restaurant reservation, or would like steal a parking place after you've been waiting in line for carpool, or you just get the sense that they're kind of rotten people all around, and have this like sense of entitlement because they're richer, and so they're just gonna like solve this problem, like their kid or their spouse wasn't dealing with the test taking properly, and so they're just going to solve the problem. And there was a real flavor of just privilege, just to the nth degree. It was gross.
Entitlement.
As school counselor, I preferred working in the schools for at-risk kids, because the ones that I worked in that were in the well-to-do areas, the parents refused to hear the word no. And even the principal, if you would tell a parent no, the principal would say, you can't do that. They are so-and-so, he's a judge, or she's, whatever. And I really felt sorry for their kids, because their parents were living their lives for them, and not giving them credit for making decisions and doing the work that needed to be done to achieve something. And so I preferred working with the poor kids, the immigrants from Mexico, and the kids that lived on the wrong side of the tracks, because their parents truly, truly appreciated every little thing that you did for their kids. And for the most part, these kids were the first ones to graduate from high school in their extended family. And there was just so much pride in that. And believe me, the kids did it all by themselves. And in my opinion, they're better people now as adults than the ones whose parents demanded so much for them.
I kind of think it goes back to what we talked about earlier too with the helicopter parenting, that there are those parents, and I can't say all of them in this particular scandal are those parents, but there are parents who literally see their child as an extension of themselves. And so if they see that and they see that their kid didn't rise to the level that they believe that they ought to have, they would do nearly anything to fix that, because it's their own identity wrapped up in their child's accomplishments. I work with juvenile probationers, and not all of the parents, but many of our parents never have any of their energies wrapped up in their kids or their kids' accomplishments. I mean, we have parents who will move out of the state the moment that their kid is briefly detained for a very minor referral. At times we see some of the worst things, and I certainly don't endorse that. But somewhere between abject neglect and helicopter parenting is a wonderful balance.
Like two ends of the spectrum.
Super helpful, super helpful. And again, we have some amazing parents in our system, but relatively few if their kids are deeply involved. We literally have kids who every day I marvel that they have only committed minor crimes at times when I look at their backgrounds, and I think, how have you not gotten so angry? I mean, they're amazing pillars of strength themselves, but we want parents to definitely take pride in their child and to be attached and to put in the effort and hope that their child is a big, big part of their life, if not the most important things in their life. But on the other hand, not see that the child's actions or accomplishments are a reflection entirely of themselves. They may have influenced some of it, but that doesn't mean that that should be their identity. That just creates such dysfunction.
Right.
And the last question is, how do your children inspire you?
With 6 of them, and one of them who has autism, I just am amazed. I mean, and 3 of them whose mother abandoned them, they inspire me every day. I just feel so blessed. I just feel kissed by God to watch these kids grow up, because they are just amazing kids, every one of them.
I feel like I have to reach deep, even now that my kids are grown, to try to be my best self because they're watching. And I don't know, they provided a lot of grounding for me, since I didn't have that strong of family of origin when I was super young. I know a lot more of my family members now than I did growing up. But it is wonderful to have that, people to provide for and to give to. I mean, it is a great feeling.
I strive to be my best every day. I mean, in part it's for me, but in the beginning it was really so that they would look up to me. I wanted to give them something I didn't really have. I wanted to give them the stability and the love and the unconditional presence that I'd wished I'd had at moments. And so, I am such a better person because of them. And my husband also gives me a lot of strength. He's a great person. And when I need to bounce something off of. Any one of them gives me good advice. But especially now that they're older, I trust them as adult-like friends, and they push me. But when they were little, I wanted to be someone they'd look up to and feel safe with.
I think, I decided when they were little that they were not going to be raised by wolves, kind of thing. So it was really important to me to give them, like others have said, that stability and a role model and whatnot. And I guess they inspire me when you look at what they're doing in their lives now and the fact that they're happy and they're handling their lives. I mean, I am thrilled that, they're in jobs, they're doing their lives. And I look at the challenges that they've had to overcome already. I don't know if any of you have kids that have played college sports and all that, but it's like a meat market. And they had injuries, and they had, high highs and low lows, and just trying to keep perspective in all of it. That, knowing these things are not, they're life-changing. That my one son, I think, was very life-changing because we used to ski as a family. We can't do that anymore after 3 knee surgeries. It's changed his life, and not in a good way. I wanted them to stop playing football and save their bodies, and they wouldn't hear of it. So was that his pride and his ego? I don't know. But, he made a decision at, in your early 20s, that's going to impact the rest of his life. But that in itself is inspiring, because he's had to make adjustments in things, in what he does and what he can and can't do. And to see, isn't that what I guess we want our kids, at least I did, for them they're going to get thrown punches all through life, and to be able to take the bends, take the curves, and then come out and keep going straight without going, crashing down in the gully saying, I can't do this. So it's, as long as they can keep readjusting their sails, I guess, for a little more of a cliche way to say it, but that's what I want. And so they do inspire me. Every time I see them get knocked down and get back up, that inspires me, because I'm like, you cannot fall apart. You can fall apart for a minute, you can fall apart for a week or two, but really, I mean, and just listening to all of you women, it's like I'm inspired by all of your stories. I mean, I think it just shows that nobody gets to skate through life. And like the parents that we were just talking about, shame on them, to just trading wealth for character, and that hole in the soul and the hollow bones. I'll take character and a little bit of hardship any day, because
Absolutely.
We're writing books about it because we have something to say, I mean, it's better than writing a check and having nothing else to say but like, great checks, right?
Beautifully said, beautifully said.
Write books, not checks.
All of the panelists' books are available on Amazon, and you can find the links in the description below the video, as well as links to their websites, lameredith.com, elizabethsilverwriter.com, jeanneblasberg.com, and raisingthebottom.com. It was a real pleasure having you with us today, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all. That was fun.